Let's talk about the essence of resistance in a nutshell. Tom Homan, Trump's so-called border czar, recently admitted that protests are making their abusive immigration raids more difficult and more dangerous. This, my friends, is the essence of resistance, right there in a nutshell. Hey, I'm Tad Sturmer. I teach public history at Johns Hopkins, and I am the author of the forthcoming A Resistance History of the United States. Resistance requires an understanding of two fundamental things: authority, especially its abuses, and opposition, how to pause, stop, or roll back that abuse. All resistance in our context operates on that spectrum. So Homan's admission is a shining example of this core principle in action. Now, of course, I delve into this much more in my forthcoming book, but we don't need to wait for that to talk about how that fits into what's happening right now. When talking about the protests going on right now in Los Angeles, let's consider the spark. Well, there certainly is, a general disaffection and a growing disaffection with this regime. The outrage was concentrated on one particularly insidious abuse of authority: the paramilitary blitzkrieg on people who had committed the equivalent of international jaywalking. Now, let's be crystal clear on this. Being in the United States without legal status is not a criminal offense. It's a civil violation. People are not here illegally because they are breaking no criminal law. Yet, we've witnessed ICE agents and other masked stormtroopers in full combat gear. I never wore so much any day I was in the Army, and I was in combat arms as a scout. Seeing those people descending with performative force on children, parents who had committed no crime. And at the most, even if they crossed the border at an illegal point, at an unlawful point, they're guilty of a misdemeanor at worst. That's a pretty clear abuse of authority in almost any country on earth, and certainly in any of the free ones. So when people point to Germany in the 1930s, these are always useful conversations to have. And I think much more accurately to the occupied zones the Nazis controlled after 1939, and say that America is beginning to look like that. This is what I think they mean. I think is most helpful for us, if that's what we mean, is a regime using state violence to define and punish entire groups of people, not for what they've done, but for who they are. That's recognizing the warnings of the Holocaust. Because the first step in any abusive authority regime is always the same: mark the others, strip them of legal protections, and perform power against them in full view to prove the state can do it. The protests started against that. In terms of resistance as a process, we got through the first stage, articulation, my word, pretty quickly. Protest, by its very nature, and this is what I mean by articulation, literally puts the abuse you are resisting into words. The abuse gets defined so people know what they are resisting against, and people know what they are joining together to oppose. This is a necessary step. It draws lines, it makes things clear. So for sustained resistance movements, a lot more has to happen to be able to do this across time and push back in a macro sense. Organized opposition and then active resistance over the long term. But let's stay focused on this moment, this resistance moment. It is already achieved without violence. And don't at me about fireworks versus guns, horses, and tanks. In this whole thing, there have been 2 Molotov cocktail incidents reported so far, and those have been without injury. In any case, this resistance moment has achieved, in micro, what all resistance movements hope to achieve. As a matter of kind, if not in degree, at the very least, you have to make it harder for abusive authority to abuse. Make them feel. Make every step cost them something. Make it distract them. Make them spend money to deploy. 134 million by a recent tally. Make it annoy them. Make their troops start to feel the strain of operating against their neighbors, their friends, their fellow citizens. Make them pause and have to pay before they move on again. Done. It won't stop them. These regimes don't operate that way, and it's what Americans must understand today. This is the historical lesson for your resistance dispatch of the day. This regime represents the kind of abusive authority that many, particularly white Americans, the comfortable class, have never seen. The kind of regime that is only emboldened by the absence of opposition, and there is no organized opposition yet in the United States. They will not stop until they are stopped. Samuel Adams understood that. John Brown understood that. Martin Luther King understood that. But what's going on in Los Angeles and spreading to Texas and Washington State and elsewhere is something to be noted. to be understood, and even celebrated. If you care about opposing this regime and seeing how history can place and inform it, it is doing what all resistance worthy of the word must do. Now do it again.